Submission Radio Mahogany Lounge brought to you by Musashi, here with John Morgan. Very excited to have you in the Mahogany Lounge. Quickly, the feeling, the vibe of the lounge, because this is pretty fantastic. I mean, you get that Anchorman feeling, but really, it just goes beyond that.
I mean, really, what people can't see is what's behind us. You know, I mean, you set up the shot pretty well, the best you could. But I mean, if they could really see what's over that side of the room, they would see the true glory that is the lounge. And most of it has to remain secret because these are things that you need, obviously, membership for, passes, these sort of things. I'm not sure that everything should be made public. But, yeah, phenomenal way to cap off a phenomenal night.
Well, let's talk about the phenomenal night, because Tyron Woodley and Damian Maia had a fight where...
That's a phenomenal night?
Well, a phenomenal night that had, and maybe not the most...
your words, not ours, all right?
That had maybe a fight that wasn't loved by the people. There were a couple of boos, maybe one or two, maybe a few thousand boos when Tyron Woodley fought Damian Maia, in a fight that fans didn't really love. What was your takeaway when you saw this fight play out? I suppose what I want to know is this what you expected, or was this even sort of worse than your expectations going in here?
Well, it's definitely what I expected in terms of strategy. I mean, that's the way those two matchups come together. You know what I mean? So I think we knew that if Tyron was going to win the fight, that's what it was going to be. It was going to be a lot of Maia trying to press inside, not being able to get the takedown. What I would say, I guess, is that I think you wanted to see him put his foot on the gas a little bit in the 4th or 5th round. You know, when you're very, very slick at that point, you're not that worried. I mean, sweat is pouring all over. You're not that worried about Maia necessarily getting a hold of you. Man, when you know you've got him hurt, it was crazy how early that eye was just blown up, you know. So you thought the finish might come early. So maybe, you know, I would like to see him push. You know, of course, then, as it always does have when we get to the post-fight press conferences, you know, Tyron lays it out there. Oh, by the way, my shoulder was like slipping out of socket, so I couldn't exactly throw the right hand like I wanted to. So, I mean, there were certainly extenuating circumstances, and I really do respect Tyron for what he says. He's like, look, this is the guy I'm fighting. This is the strategy you have to implement. This is what you got to do. So you feel bad for the guy because I don't know, man. Fans just love to hate on Tyron Woodley.
I'm just going to be completely honest and say that Tyron Woodley has said a lot of things that have at times, I can understand why people would consider them cringeworthy. Tonight, probably one of the first times in a long time that I've really sided with the guy. I understand it. Damian Maia's gone out and taken plenty of guys down, and he did what he had to do. So I'm wondering, do you think the criticism was fair? Do you think maybe it was a bit too harsh? And what did you think about Dana White going out of his way to really throw him under the bus?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, here's the thing is, like, fans booing, okay? If you spent $200 or $300 to get your ticket or whatever the case may be and you're watching that fight, I could see why you might boo. I mean, are we going to sit back and go, that was the most exciting mixed martial arts fight I've ever seen? It wasn't. Yeah. Was it the right strategy? Was it what Tyron needed to do to maintain his belt? Was it what he needed to do to help move his career forward? Absolutely, it was the right thing to do. I do think it does suck that essentially, you know, he thought he might get George St. Pierre, and that was ripped off the table. You know, Dana White's going to be Dana White. You're always going to get him to speak his mind. The thing about Dana is one day, you know, Tyron's terrible, and the next day you know, Dana did say some good things. He did say, you know, the guy is a beast. If you had a remote control for him, you know, you could do amazing things to them. So, I mean, he did say that the potential's there. It's not like, I don't know how this guy's ever going to be a champion. You know, so, you know, that's just Dana. It's not like it's anything new. But I think the criticism is fair. I mean, was it exciting? No, it wasn't incredibly exciting. Was it effective? It was incredibly effective.
I feel like the nice things that Dana White said, they got lost in all the negativity. It's like a big pile of diarrhea, and then you put a cherry in it. No one's going to confuse it for a sundae. I guess the other thing is with this GSP fight, all of a sudden, did you like that one, John? You're like, what an analogy.
Mahogany Lounge is a classy place.
Get some poop metaphors in here. That's what I'm always down for.
The first of many. But with this GSP fight now being the GSP Bisping fight, and Dana claiming that, you know, it was in the 5th round that he made that decision, who are we kidding? Do you really think it had anything to do with the Tyron fight, or do you think sometime in the last 24 hours, far before maybe the event even started, this GSP Bisping fight was made?
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. You know, I believe that certainly the option was on the table. It wasn't like during the 5th round he's pulling out the bat phone to George St. Pierre and saying, hey, I know you probably haven't thought about this, but what, you know, I'm sure it was definitely in the mix. These things are very fluid. I mean, they always are. It's funny because, you know, a lot of times people say, oh, man, don't you get sick of Dana lying, sick of doing this? Like, things do change, and they do change that fast. You know, it's on a whim. So, no, I do think that was probably the final nail in the coffin, so to speak. Of course, it was already in the works.
Do you think maybe it was GSP? Maybe he was like, Dana, I think Michael Bisping has more stock at the moment than that Tyron.
It's all happening here, John. You got to just become a part of it.
This is some fantastic stuff there. Yeah, I mean, you could just dub over right there, cut to some B-roll, and you'd be think it'll look good. Yeah, no, you know, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if GSP or his manager reached out and, you know, how about just a little "told you so," you know, or something like that. You never know. I mean, that's what you got to do. Managers got to make their hustle, right?
So let's talk about what's next for Tyron then, because Robbie Lawler's coming off a win over Donald Cerrone. Is that the logical next fight for the champ?
Probably so. I mean, you know, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, it's not like Robbie Lawler was sticking his hand in the air saying, "Boy, give me that title fight back. I sure earned it tonight." You know, it's like he's saying, "Well, you know, I certainly have some personal things that he wants to deal with, and understandably so. But even professionally speaking, he just kind of said, you know, I've got some things to work on. I'm going to get better." So, but it makes as much sense as anything else. I mean, and that wouldn't be honestly, would that really be the worst thing? We get like a normal welterweight title fight. I mean, the GSP thing was fun. I'm still not a huge fan of GSP coming up and fighting at 185 against Michael Bisping, to be honest with you. I'd like to see Michael Bisping, you know, defend against one of those top contenders. I don't hate on Bisping for wanting the big money fight, and Whitaker's hurt. So, I mean, things have fallen his way, but I don't think the Lawler fight would be the worst decision.
Do you believe Dana White when he says that GSP will stay on and fight Robert Whitaker if he does beat Michael Bisping? Do you think that fight will actually happen?
I think it could. I think it could. You know, I do get a sense that George St. Pierre wants to do more than just one fight. But, I mean, I think he just loves that Bisping. The funny thing about George St. Pierre versus Michael Bisping is they both won it because they both think each other is easy. That's the funniest part of the whole situation. So it's tough to say. I mean, gosh, I felt we've had so many false starts on this GSP situation anyway, where we thought we had them and then we don't, that I'm not even going to pretend like I know what's in the cards there.
I want to ask you about a couple of more things. And obviously, John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. Crazy comeback for the light heavyweight champion, or the former champion, now the current and new champion. It's the end of an era, this John Jones and Daniel Cormier rivalry. We're going to be talking about it later on in the lounge as well. But do you think in some ways it was one of the most interesting things going on in the division, a currently very thin division, but at the same time, a birth of a new star in Volkan Ozdemir? Do you think that kind of worked out perfectly, where we don't really know what's going to happen with John Jones? Maybe he fights Lesnar, maybe he doesn't, maybe he rematches Gustafsson, but at least you've got this ace in the hole in the background with Volkan Ozdemir.
I think so. I think it was a good night overall. I mean, Daniel Cormier, I think, was pretty close to the end of his fighting career anyway. Now, I don't know if he's done now. He may come back and fight a few more times, but he's got the commentating career lined up. You know, he was reaching towards the tail end, and I think the fact that you get to reestablish John Jones, because he's your future in the division, right? I mean, the guy was already the past, and, you know, had Cormier beat him and then walked off, like he said in the press conference, you know, I'm going to do this. You know, this is the big FU scenario, man. You know, that would have been tough for everybody, not just John Jones, but the UFC as well. So, and then as you mentioned, the emergence of Volkan Ozdemir, who continues to just shock and surprise and keep proving the naysayers wrong. He's a new name that matters. He told me this week, you know, he was going to get a first-round knockout, and he feels like he'll be the fastest ever to a title shot. Alexander Gustin has something to say about that, but it's probably not too far in the future.
Well, John, the blue looks good in the Mahogany Lounge. Your club jacket is on the way. Thank you so much for visiting and sharing your wisdom with us here in the lounge.
Thanks, fellas. Always a pleasure.
Submission Radio here with good friend Adam Hill at UFC 214 in the Mahogany Lounge. Now, before we even get into Chris Cyborg and, of course, a big win here, historic, how's the lounge feeling for you, Adam? You've been in some nice places before. Is there a classy feeling to it? How's the vibe for you?
No, for sure. There is. I'm loving it here. First of all, I love all the microphones, too. This is good. I want people to know that are watching this. This is not natural. This didn't just happen. I saw you guys moving ferns. Are these ferns? I don't know, plants. They're moving them around. You guys are doing a lot of work over here. You didn't just find like a nice area to shoot. You created this here at the Honda Center. It's very impressive.
Well, interior decorating is a big part of Submission Radio. Mahogany Lounges bring out the inner essence in a person when they talk about fighting, and there's a lot of fighting to talk about. Let's talk about Chris Cyborg and this historic night at the Honda Center. We all think back to Ronda Rousey versus Liz Carmouche as a historic night in MMA, in women's MMA. Tonight, what happened here, Cyborg winning the title, do you think one day in the future people are going to look back on it similarly to what happened with Ronda and Liz?
It's certainly possible. And by the way, right here in this building, same building that this happened. for Ronda Rousey kickstarting the women's bantamweight division. Now Cyborg becoming the champion. Now we've had a 145-pound champion in Jermaine Durandamy. We know what that was. I mean, Cyborg she was injured. She had the USADA stuff. This feels like it's the birth of the 145-pound division. It's been talked about for a long time. It's really only created because Ronda has moved on. I don't think it ever would have happened if Ronda was around and still competing and still at the top of her game. So they were looking to create a new star, and Cyborg has just kind of been there waiting. She's been, I think most people would say, the best female fighter in the world for the last decade. She just hasn't been the UFC champion, and now she is. She's got the title, and now you can start to have, just like when Ronda was the champion, there really wasn't a contender. There wasn't anybody that could really challenge her. Now you're going to start to see contenders emerge that might be able to push Cyborg a little bit, and I'm looking forward to that because I think Cyborg is really, really good. I think she's, an incredible fighter, but I don't think anybody has really been her equal. I want to see people rise to that occasion and really challenge her and see what she's got.
What did you think of Tanya's performance tonight? Because while we're talking about equals, a lot of people thought that she might be one of Cyborg's toughest tests. And to be fair, she did, I guess, offensively not that great.
Yeah, don't do that.
But she hung in there longer than previous opponents.
She did, but I was watching it, and I actually thought Evinger would do better than she did. I think people were giving her credit and saying, "Oh wow, you didn't get hurt and you didn't fall down and go to sleep in there. Good job." I mean. Listen, she's a professional fighter. She's been around for a long time. She's had a lot of success. I don't think she would say I'm very happy that I made it into the third round. She didn't do much offensive. She didn't threaten. And I know, one of the factors is Cyborg's power is incredible, and you can prepare for it and you can talk about it. When you feel it, it's a different thing. And I think early in the fight, Evinger felt a couple shots and she was like, "Wow, that hurt." And she's gritty. She's tough. We talked about this all week, that it was a good opponent to feature Cyborg, to say, hey, look, this is how good Cyborg is. It's not going to be somebody that falls down after one punch. You're going to get to see her actually do a little something. And I thought Evinger would make it to the third round, but I also thought she'd get Cyborg down. She'd challenge her on the mat a little bit. Evinger really wasn't doing anything offensive, and I think it's unfair to her and everything that she's accomplished to say that, she did something. She had a moral victory tonight just by not getting knocked out early. She's a better fighter than that, and I'm sure she'll tell you the same thing, that she would have liked to have a more representative performance.
He said it's a developing division, and now the big question is who's next? Who's going to fight Cyborg next? No doubt this is going to be a big fight. Kat Zingano's floating around. Holly Holm was in the back today. What are you feeling here? What do you think is next for Cyborg?
Well, Cyborg herself said she wants to fight Holly Holm next. That's who she wanted to challenge. Obviously, it's a big name for her, and that's what she wants now. And I think that's a good challenge because Holly Holm's not going to back down. We know Holly Holm's striking ability, and I think that's a really good matchup stylistically to test Cyborg a little bit. I'm looking forward to that fight at some point. I would like to see Kat Zingano next. Now, the thing you have with both Holm and Zingano is their recent track record is not great. I know Zingano's been out a year. She's coming off a couple of losses. It'd be weird to put her into a title shot, but that's kind of where we are right now. Who else would you want to see? I think Zingano gives a really good challenge to Cyborg in that I think she's not going to back down. She can take a couple of shots. She can get inside, get her to the ground, and test her on the mat with jiu-jitsu. And I think Holly Holm, as a striker, is going to have that, she has that experience. She's a really good striker, and she can challenge her in her world. But I think either of those fights works. To me, I'd like to see Zingano next, though, because I really think stylistically that's a matchup that I want to check out.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, like you mentioned, considering their track record. One thing that I want to bring up, and that is something that Cyborg said during the pre-fight, I think, post-workout scrum, and that is how it's not really her goal to be the face of MMA, the face of women's MMA. She just wants to be a good role model for girls around the world. Although, if you are the champion, you sort of are that role model anyway, and you can be the face of MMA. Do you think she needs to sort of embrace it? Because we don't have a Ronda Rousey now. We don't have one single female that's kind of, I guess, captaining women's MMA. Do you think she needs to embrace it if she wants to, I guess, take her career to the next level? And just the fact that she is the champion and what she's accomplished.
Well, I mean, I guess it's what you want. I mean, she should embrace it. She should say, hey, listen, they created this division for you. Now, it took a long time to get there, and they criticized her and, made fun of her appearance and everything else for so long. But this division is here because you forced it to be here. Embrace that. Take over. take on all challenges, knock everybody out, and become the superstar that you're capable of being based on your skill level. I think she should take all that into consideration, into account. I think what she's really saying when she's talking about not being the face of women's MMA is, it's a lot of responsibility, first of all, and you look what happened with Ronda Rousey. She was it. She was the superstar. She was the person everybody, when you talk to women's fighting, it was just Ronda Rousey for a while. There wasn't even anybody else. So when she loses and she's gone, all of a sudden, everybody's looking around and saying, well, what is women's MMA now? And I think Cyborg is aware of that, and she's conscious of it, saying, I don't want my entire, my legacy to determine the future for other females. But in the end, it is about yourself, and it's about making yourself money. And the more popular you get, the more people look at you as the face of MMA or whatever you want to say. It's going to be beneficial for her and her career. So she should embrace it on some level.
We don't really know what's going to happen next as far as who Cyborg's going to be fighting, but as far as the relationship between her and the UFC, it looks like it's somewhat decent now. Dana admitted that they made mistakes. Cyborg has gone on record and said that she's forgiven Dana White. So now it comes down to how are the UFC going to promote her? Do you think that she will at some point, I guess, be transcending into other, I don't know if I'd say industries, but do you think they will try and push her like they did Ronda Rousey? Do you think there will ever be a time where we see Cyborg on Jimmy Kimmel or Conan or Jimmy Fallon or having those kinds of opportunities?
Yeah, I think they're going to try to make those things happen, and certainly with WME, they can figure some things out. I mean, she's not going to be in an Entourage type movie. It's not her personality. It doesn't fit. It wouldn't work. But if she keeps knocking people out and she's scary like she is, and she wins a couple of fights, yeah, I think talk shows are going to want to have her on. There's going to be roles that she can play. Now it's just the way things work out. Where Ronda Rousey can play, the leading actress in some movie, Cyborg will be the villain or whatever they're going to do with her.
Expendables, she could be like one of the Expendables.
Yeah, she could do that. I mean, and listen, it's just the way it is, and it's unfortunate to say it, but that's where it is right now because she doesn't look like Ronda Rousey. That's why she wasn't in the UFC for a long time, and it's completely unfair. It's just the way that it is. So I'm sure we'll see them figure out ways to push her, and that's what WME IMG has brought to the UFC. I mean, that's what they do. That's their business. They figure out where to make people fit into a certain thing as far as the Hollywood image and what roles they can do, what commercials they can do, that sort of thing. So, yeah, they're going to figure out things for her to do. But I do think it is something to watch because you mentioned that Cyborg said she forgave Dana. She did, but she also said, I can forgive. I can't forget. I know what he said about me. I'm working for this guy who has said all these terrible things about me and how I look. I look like Vanderlei Silva in a dress, and and he did her walking impression. I mean, she said, I still know that he said these things, and we're going to try to move forward and have a relationship, but she's going to be useful to them as long as she's winning fights and knocking people out and people are wanting to see her. But I have a feeling that when she's not anymore and she has a couple losses, they're done with her, and all the old feelings will come back out for her toward them as well.
What did you make of the part during the press conference where I believe it was Ariel who was asking about how her contract is up in October? And when we spoke to Cyborg, she said that if she wins the belt, she has to stay for a year. That's part of her contract. But when Ariel followed up, and it was a good follow-up, saying, okay, fine, you don't know whether you're going to re-sign, but do you want to re-sign? She didn't give a clear indicator. She didn't say yes. She sort of just said, look, I'm happy with winning the belt. Do you take anything away from that? That maybe in the back of her mind, she's sort of, playing her chips right, doesn't want to reveal her cards, but maybe she is and has been for a while thinking about, once I can leave, good chance I will.
No, I think that's absolutely true, and I think it all ties into, and that's what I'm getting at in that. Yeah, she forgives Dana because now they're working together and he's given her this opportunity. She thanked Dana White in the cage tonight. Whoever thought 4 or 5 years ago you would have Cyborg stand in a cage thanking Dana White for something? I mean, you never thought that would happen, but right now it is all working. He helps her, she helps him. Everything's good right now, but I think she wants to leave her options open, and she doesn't want to say, yeah, I'm coming back here, because who knows where the relationship is going to be in a year. So those are all things to figure out, and I think it'll be fascinating to monitor going forward, because she's not going to just ignore the fact that all these things have been said about her. And it's like John Jones was talking about as well, that his relationship is strained with Dana because he feels like Dana White is your best friend when things are going well, and he doesn't care about you when things are going poorly. And I think I get where John's coming from with that, because I think that's certainly true. But I understand Dana's side of that as well. Like, Dana's here to run a business. He's not everybody's friend, and what company? Everybody has a job out there. If you're watching this, you've got a job, and when you are killing it at work, and you're making your boss money or you're making your boss look good, you're probably going to get along with them pretty well. And if you're not, you're probably not going to have a very good relationship with them. So it's like any other job, and I understand both sides of that. I don't think it's fair to put it all on Dana and say, oh, you just ignore these people that aren't doing well for you. Well, like, yeah, he's the boss. Like, that's his job.
It was going to be interesting to see how negotiations go, especially with Tito Ortiz as a part of it. Adam Hill, Mahogany Lounge, take it in. Thank you so much for coming in.
It's awesome. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware. I don't understand all the cultural things that you guys know or don't know over there. But are you guys familiar with Between Two Ferns by Zach Galifianakis?
Never heard of it,
What is
and
that
therefore we
show?
can't be sued for plagiarism. Okay, don't even try it.
I just feel like it's similar. I feel like,
Adam, these ferns are a lot bigger. It's
actually-
completely different.
It's actually in front of two ferns instead of between those. Like, if it was on the outside, it'd be different.
In front of two ferns. Seems
In
pretty
front of two
good.
ferns, I like it. I mean, come on, Brad Pitt, Obama, bunch of other people. Who cares?
He
We've
never-
got you.
Galifianakis never got me. I mean,
That's
I would
exactly
do
right.
it, but Zach, if you're watching, I'll do
No,
it.
he
So,
wouldn't. He's locked in here.
I am. You're right. I enjoy you guys.
And there's no Mahogany, of course. Adam Hill, thanks for coming in.
Thank you guys. Anytime.
All right, guys, it's been a great night here in the Submission Radio Mahogany Lounge. We have a very, very special guest before we wrap up for tonight. You, of course, know who he is, but I'm going to give him an introduction anyway. He's a legend in wrestling and MMA. Of course, I'm talking about Dave Meltzer, who is here with us and weathering the storm where it's really late. Very kind for you to join us here tonight. And there's a few things for us to talk about. First thing, before we even talk about the main event between John Jones and DC, I want to get your thoughts and feelings on the buy rate for this pay-per-view. We've seen some rough buy rates recently. Do you think this one has broken the trend and will be a positive response when you put up the results eventually?
Well, I mean, it was going to be the biggest of the year, and it was going to be the biggest since December, of course, because there's nothing else that would compare to it. But the question is like what that number is. Dana White threw out a figure of $1 million, which is a lot higher than I expected. If that comes true, then this is a huge success. I think 700,000 would be a huge success right now, because you got to remember that we're only a month away from Mayweather-McGregor, and a lot of people are saving up, and that's the big fight, and that took some of the hype away from this one. This one would have done better if it was not so close. So if it's anything over 7, I would consider that really good. I saw John Jones when he said $1 million. His face lit up because he gets a cut of that, and that's a lot more money than I think he was expecting out of this one.
What do you think that says about John Jones and his drawing power and just the event in general? Because remember for UFC 182, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that drew around about 800,000 or so.
The last one that they had.
Yeah.
Right around 8. Yeah.
And that was a massive, massive event, and I guess the grudge matches, that's what really builds it. And this is another one, and if it draws 700,000, do you consider that a successful one?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would consider anything over probably 600 a success, just because of how the last year has been. Maybe people were saving up and waiting for the big fight, and that's why they hadn't been buying the other ones. I don't know, but I didn't think the grudge aspect of it was anywhere close to as strong as the first one. But it was, I will say this, the TV commercials building it up with John Jones and Daniel Cormier were excellent. So there was that. And, John Jones hadn't fought in a long time. John Jones going after the championship. And again, a great undercard. And not that the great undercard usually makes a big bit of difference, but it makes some difference.
Well, let's talk about the fight, because it was a very, very good contest. People expected a lot from this fight, and it really delivered. I mean, DC looked great in this fight, and then John Jones was able to turn it around and win this one. Talk to us a little bit about your feelings as we were going through those first couple of rounds. Did you feel like DC was on his way to winning this?
I can't say I felt that DC was on his way to winning it, but I would say from the middle of because John came out really fast, and so I thought, oh, this is going to be tough for DC to survive this fight. And then DC took all the stuff and started coming back and hitting him with the hooks and everything, and from probably the middle of the first round until the head kick, I said, this is a real fight, I mean, and it's like it's a real fight, and maybe DC can tag him in the decision. The first round was sort of close. The second round was close. And I was thinking, I had it even. Some people had it 2-0 DC even. Some had it 2-0 John Jones. So it's like, okay, and I didn't sense that John was going to knock him out, and I didn't sense that John was going to submit him. I thought we were going to have 5 rounds of this. And I said, this is even if DC loses, this is a real fight. And then he got the head kick, which changed the whole fight. If that head kick hadn't landed, we could have had a really classic fight.
What do you think is next for DC? Because, like Dennis mentioned, I think a lot of people will agree with the sentiments that DC was looking really, really good. Some people even thought DC won the first 2 rounds. Right. I'm with you, Dave. I thought it was one apiece. But I think he looked really, really good, and then he got caught. Obviously, Jones is the better man tonight. Yeah. Do you think that this loss is so devastating? And clearly, this was the big one for DC. This is what he wanted. He was already champion. He already held the belt. What he wanted was to beat Jon Jones, and he hasn't done that. May not get another chance. Do you think he comes back? Do you think there's any chance he retires?
Oh, I do think there's a chance he retires, because it's like, what exactly is there to do? I mean, the funny thing is that he could go up to heavyweight right now, and I think that he could probably have a good shot at earning himself a championship fight with Stipe Miocic. So, there is that. At the same time, he's been champion, and this was, in a sense of, if he could beat Jon Jones, he would be an all-time great. And I don't know if he's an all-time great, and he's close to it. So, I mean, this was his legacy, was this fight. And, he didn't win the first one, he didn't win the second one. And even if he, the thing about, I think Jon Jones did a good job of, after the fight, as far as, like, talking about, that DC was a real champion and everything like that. But I know in the fans' eyes, this whole period, nobody bought DC as the champion because he didn't beat Jon Jones. Even when he won the championship, when he beat Gustafsson, when he beat Rumble, and Jon Jones was out of the commission, it was always like, well, Jon Jones is still the better fighter. And so it's that thing of, yes, he legitimately was champion. He was legitimately world champion in this sport. And maybe people, when looking back, will give him that credit. But right now, I mean, it was always like, well, he was world champion because Jon was on hiatus.
Do you think there's a scenario where him and Velasquez could coexist in the heavyweight division? Or do you think the only way he moves up is if Velasquez just can't come back due to injuries? But
you know what? It's like they could coexist in the division. I mean, Cane's having a rough time, and they could go in there. I mean, if whatever happens, I mean, put it this way: if Cane were to get a title shot, which I think is pretty likely, against Miocic and win over Miocic, then no, but what's the point? But if Cane's injured and can't fight, or if Cane fights Miocic and loses a close fight, could he move up and go in there? Yeah, he could if he wants to. He's 38 also, and he's got a broadcasting job, and who knows what the motivation is, if he can get that motivation back. I mean, he really did look good until he got caught, though. I mean, so it's kind of like you can't say he was done. He looked better than I expected him to look, really.
So obviously now Jon Jones is back. The career, everything is back on track. The legacy is looking great so far. But let's be honest, the big news tomorrow that everybody's going to wake up to is Brock Lesnar, Jon Jones, what's going on. And of course, Jon Jones is here at the press conference just before saying that he doesn't want anything else to take away from his story, but from his big win. Do you think it kind of hurts, I guess, his goals, the fact that this Brock Lesnar thing is such a heat-of-the-moment situation?
Oh, I think that he loves that, because it's like, that's like he said, it's a great fight for him. It's a winnable fight for him, and it's a lot of money for him, and it's a fight that will capture the imagination of the public, and it's the kind of a fight that, Jon's at a certain level, and I guess this week we'll find out exactly what that level is when the pay-per-view numbers come in. But what I do know is that if he beats Brock Lesnar, he goes up a level. And he'll stay up a level, because he'll become more of a mainstream star. That's the kind of fight that, when I heard people talking about that fight, I said, like, man, that's the fight that, and Jon's camp thought the same thing. That's the fight Jon should go for 100%. That should be it, because if Jon wants to be a Conor McGregor or a, Tiger Woods or whatever you want to call it, that level of a star, that's the fight to get him there, not Stipe Miocic and not Gustafsson, even though, to me, yes, I would rather see the Gustafsson fight more than anything. But for business and for him, the fight is with the best fight for him is with Lesnar, for sure.
Be honest, being a pro wrestling guy like yourself, when he cut that promo at the end and dropped the mic afterwards, we've seen great guys like Chael Sonnen and Conor McGregor call out their next opponents. How much did you love that from Jon Jones?
Oh, I thought that I thought the whole thing that he did, everything he did from when he showed up all night, I thought that he carried himself like a superstar. And people love a redemption story. A lot of people don't like Jon Jones, and they have reason not to. But I think that he came off so magnanimous, and that he probably changed a lot of minds. And at the same time, I think that I think people really always did want to like John Jones. The stuff that was always the turnoff was the personality thing. And now that the personality thing, he was just so nice about everything like that, I can see people kind of like getting behind him, because let's face it, he is a super talent. Everyone wants to get behind a super talent. And, you know, a lot of people forget about John Jones. Like, they think, oh, people always didn't like John Jones. Like, I remember when he fought Shogun Rua, and everybody loved John Jones. When it turned was with Rashad Evans, because people saw that you know, they believed that John Jones was kind of a phony, and people don't like phonies. Yeah. So everyone's forgot that now. And then the whole thing with all this other stuff, you know, that made it worse and worse and worse. But now he says, I'm going to do the work the straight and narrow, and I'm trying, and he says all the right things, you know, whether it's, you know, and in time we'll find out if he's serious, because the one thing is that if he does screw up now, he won't have that, because people will, at that point, will probably go, okay. But they'll still buy his fights because he's a great fighter. But to get behind him, to be that next level superstar, I think he knows he needs to be keep a clean profile now.
Brock Lesnar seems like he may be interested in the fight, but what people don't know is he's going through, I guess, some negotiations with the WWE. How real do you think is Brock Lesnar about actually wanting this fight, and how much of it is just negotiating with Vince for possibly more money or a better deal or something else? I
think it's both, but here's the deal. Brock Lesnar has never had the shot. I mean, Brock Lesnar made a lot of money in UFC, but this is a different level. I mean, this will be more money in one night than Brock Lesnar's ever made in his life by far. And Brock knows it. He's surrounded by smart people. So I think that from a Brock Lesnar standpoint, win, lose, or draw, he's about money. And, you know, he's 40, and these big paydays aren't going to come forever, and he's never going to have one but he's never going to have one this big. So I think this is serious as hell. Even if he wants to stay in WWE, I think he's going to go to Vince and go like, you know, he can make let's say he can make $6 million here in WWE. If he does 2 million buys on this thing, that's oh geez, you know, that could be you know, I don't know, $15 million or something, $10 million. I mean, for one night, I think that he's going to go for that for sure. It's like Mayweather McGregor. It's like, as soon as I heard them talk about Mayweather McGregor and the amount of money that was at stake, I knew the fight was going to happen. And Lesnar and Jones, it's just too much money. Jones knows it. Brock knows it too.
What would, I suppose, make Vince want to do this again? Because Lesnar is, and I mean, let's be honest, at the time right now in WWE when there's not many stars, and he is probably one of their biggest attractions, it's pretty likely he'll lose against John Jones, and it's pretty likely it's going to be a pretty one-sided fight. So what would the lure be for Vince to allow him to do something like this?
I don't know. We all thought that with Mark Hunt, and he ended up beating Mark Hunt, you know, even though he was stripped of the win. But I thought Mark Hunt was going to knock him out fast because he'd been out of the ring for so long, and then that didn't happen. I think that WWE would, again, it's the same thing. What's the lure of UFC letting McGregor do this fight? Well, I think that, you know, number one, Brock Lesnar is going to be involved in a giant fight. There's a lot of money, and if Vince can get a percentage, you know, it's, you know, and Brock's still going to be a pro wrestling star, win, lose, or draw out of that fight. So, you know, again, from a win-loss and all that standpoint, no, it doesn't make sense. But from a money standpoint, for everyone involved, there's so much money that, you know, how do you stand in the way of it?
I'm wondering if you know if Brock Lesnar has in fact enlisted into the USADA program and trying to return. Because from what we're hearing, he hasn't officially. Jeff Nowitzki apparently saying that.
Jeff Nowitzki said that last week. I know people who, you know, are close to Brock who said that he's going to. I mean, obviously,
but hasn't yet, but plans to.
That's what I heard. Yeah. In fact, actually we had all heard that he had, but obviously he hadn't. But, you know, he's going to have to do that 5 months before the fight. I mean, and here's the other thing as far as like the WWE thing. It's like, come April of next year, WWE can't stop him. And I mean, if you have that much money at stake, would you, instead of signing with WWE, would you say, I'm taking a hiatus and I will sign with you in 4 months because I'm going to take this fight? And then Vince couldn't say no, even if like Vince says, no, you can't do it. And again, Vince let him do the other one, and this is a much bigger money fight, so I think that Vince will let him do this one.
So do you think maybe we won't see John Jones for a while? Because let's be honest, Brock Lesnar, the Jones fight is probably not going to happen this year. Almost impossible, given the USADA restrictions.
December is possible. But yeah, I think probably next year is more likely.
Because he's still got 6 months left on his suspension, correct?
5.
5, okay. And he needs to come back. He needs to be clean, obviously. So maybe December. So if you're John Jones, technically you're not fighting a Gustafsson, you're not fighting Ozdemir. We may not see John Jones till the end of the year.
Yeah, I think I think that if that fight looks real for December, January in that range, then he doesn't take a risk fight in between, because that doesn't make any sense to him. Yeah.
Well, it's a crazy time here in this UFC, boxing, WWE world that's all combining quicker and quicker.
They're all getting all interchanged because everybody's looking for these crazy money fights.
Did you ever think you'd see something like that? I mean, you've been in the game for a long time. We've seen Fedor try and do it. We've seen multiple people try and do it. James Toney came in for a little bit. That's the closest we've ever got. And now it looks like everyone's just getting along together. It seems like things are getting closer and closer to sort of working together.
Yeah, I mean, once you do it, the thing is with the McGregor and Mayweather fight is, if it's as successful as everyone thinks it's going to be, the boxing promoters and the UFC promoters are going to go, well, geez, this works. Let's do it again, and they'll do it until it stops working. But I mean, I think that at that point, UFC may be like looking like getting some boxers to fight under their rules, like they did with Tony, but. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know Miocic's going to want to fight Joshua. You know, I mean, that's you know, again, I think he thinks he can make more money with Joshua than he can with anyone in UFC. The problem with that is you're going to have this thing where the UFC guys think they can make more money fighting the boxers, but the boxers only fight under boxing rules.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an unfair deal. But somehow the money has to UFC money has to equal boxing money at some point. So. You can do these fights sometimes, but the UFC fighters don't want to go like, I got to go to boxing to make my real money.
Yeah.
You don't want that situation, because essentially then you're going to be UFC is going to be the feeder system for gimmick fights that boxing will, look good in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a chance, when the negotiations happen with Vince and Brock and Dana White as well, that Conor McGregor may be a chip on the table for a possible WrestleMania appearance? If Vince lets Lesnar go over and do this UFC thing, do you think he'll really want Conor McGregor to possibly come over and do some kind of small program, appearance, surprise thing over at WrestleMania as a kind of return on the whole situation?
Well, I think they would want Conor anyway, and Conor, it's going to be up to making that deal with Conor. But as far as like, will WWE owe them favors, and will WWE ask for somebody, if it's the right person to fit into their thing? I know WWE wanted Paige Van Zandt, so and that just didn't work out from a timing reason. But and Ronda Rousey is probably the biggest bargaining chip, and Ronda. So I would say, like, as far as like, would it make it easier for Ronda Rousey to go and do something with WWE? Yes, much easier. So yeah, you got that.
Well, there you guys go. A big night here at UFC 214 in Anaheim. A big thank you to David Meltzer and everybody else for joining us at the Mahogany Lounge, Submission Rated Mahogany Lounge for the first time. Some plants in the back. Had a great time here. Thank you for tuning in. We enjoyed speaking to you guys. We'll catch you soon. Hope you enjoy the fights.